I want to thank my hosts very much for the invitation. Firstly, this is my first trip to the Philippines, and so far, so great. I love your food. I'm a foodie, so that's what it's all about. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to leave some time for questions and answers at the end, so hopefully, if I have one question from each of you, we'll only be here for about a week and a half. But think of some good things. So I am from Northeastern University, and I'm going to talk about some technical aspects of creativity, mostly in feature films. I'm giving 2 more talks the next 2 days, and I can change it up a little bit depending on the questions that are asked. So what I'm going to do is tell you some stories that I've been through myself personally for having worked on most of these films, and I hope you'll appreciate it. So again, think of those questions. So I am currently an executive professor at Northeastern University. Creative industries, does anyone know about that term? We use it to describe game design, interactive media, visual effects, computer graphics, and how all of that integrates with business, marketing, and all kinds of different fields. So creative industries is a very broad field, and these technologies have been born really in feature film visual effects. So these are a few of the movies that I contributed to, either as a technical director or a visual effects supervisor. And it's typical that the technologies that I'm going to describe, they start in universities, right, in research, and they're first used in very, very big budget productions because they're very expensive. And then they slowly work their way down into commercials and animation and video games. Here's some other projects I've been part of. I did start South Park with Matt and Trey in 1996, and everyone knows Terrence and Philip, right? Yeah, so I'm Terrence. Hello, yeah. I don't know who Philip is, but my daughters think that's pretty cool. It's hard to believe that was 1996. Can you believe it? I never thought it would take off. It shows you what I know. So between video games and feature films, what's in the box, you ask? I have a special secret prediction, a very big and bold prediction at the end of my talk. So this hopefully will keep you from walking out and being bored. If you stay to the end, I'll tell you what's in the secret box, all right? So I'm going to start by giving a very brief history of visual effects in film, because most of you weren't born probably when all of this started. So Earth to the Moon, 1902, Georges Méliès, Frenchman. Thief of Baghdad. You probably haven't seen many of these, I'm betting. But at this period of time, visual effects technology was mostly what they call in-camera. So for those of you who know film, when you're looking through the camera, and what you film is what you get, right? So you can do forced perspective miniatures, you can do backdrops and things, but there's obviously no computer graphics, very little in the way of miniatures. Very early stop motion animation. I don't know if you can see that. Very crude. Pardon me. King Kong, of course, right? This is when that stop motion animation and miniature technology really got mature. Again, it's very simple. It's just puppets on a table, and they're being taken pictures twice, 2 frames at a time, 24 frames for 1 second of film. This was the way that Matt and Trey started South Park. So, but what a difference, right? 70 years, the old one and the new one, a little bit difference. Look at the teeth on that guy. So Wizard of Oz, we're getting a little more modern, 1939. So the technology here starts what they call optical compositing. So that's a technique where you film something either rear projected or against a color, like everyone's heard of green screen, blue screen technology, and you can composite it optically out of camera in multiple passes later. And to give you an idea of the very low technology, if we were making this today, we'd use computer graphics, right? Well, back then, you see the tornado. Everyone's seen Wizard of Oz, right? Everybody? Yeah, good, okay. I like to check. But the tornado was actually a sock made out of women's nylons and filled with fuller's earth, a very fine dust, and just turned very slowly over a miniature set of a farm and filmed, as I said before, in camera, right? So it's very, very low tech, but very effective. And look, they remade movies even a long time ago. It's not only today that they're constantly remaking old films. So look, the same 2 things, again, optically composited. And the 1950s were a classic era of sci-fi. This is really a golden age of miniatures, optical effects, traditional visual effects, traditional animation, the monster from the id, done old Disney style by hand drawing, again, frame by frame. Robbie the Robot. This is one of my favorites. Has anyone not seen Forbidden Planet? Fantastic film, amazing film. So this is just getting rich and a good friend, right? This is how I get all my work done at the office. It's all about having a good assistant. So Mary Poppins, not many people think of this as a visual effects film, but it's extremely complex. Traditionally animated Disney backgrounds, again, optically composited red screen, sodium screen, dancing in the foreground. And then this is where it really takes off. This is going to be a segue into our computer graphics and our fun technology. 2001: A Space Odyssey still stands out as just an incredibly seminal film in filmmaking, but also in technology. All completely traditional, large-scale miniatures and optically composited. So here's a great behind-the-scenes shot. You can see the blue screen, the Millennium Falcon, shot with the big technology breakthrough here was, of course, motion control. And this is something that people don't realize. So the key to doing multiple passes, right? Since you can't do everything in camera anymore, you have to do it in multiple passes and then composite it later. Well, in order to do that, think about this. Every one of those passes has to be exactly, precisely the same, right? So things will line up perfectly when they're composited together. So the technology that was invented to do that was called motion control. So you actually have the camera at the end of the boom, and it's controlled very precisely by a computer. So it can exactly replicate that move over and over again. One pass will be the Millennium Falcon, another pass will be an asteroid, 2 asteroids, TIE fighters, right? You get the idea. So a gentleman by the name of John Dijkstra did that. So here we go. That was a brief background to let you know how far we've come. Computer graphics. Look at this. State of the art. Whirlwind computer. MIT in Boston. I'm from Boston, by the way, so you'll notice the central theme here about the history of computer graphics. Look at that stylus. Look at that giant thing. It's like a big cigar. So 1962. So a couple of gentlemen have the first ever example of a computer powerful enough to do graphics of any kind. 1962. This was before even I was born. And, worth millions of dollars. What did they do? What would you do? Of course, you make a video game out of it. And this is the first example of it. Space War at MIT, again in Boston, Massachusetts. Sketchpad. The early pioneers realized they needed a technique to have an interactive way of manipulating and dealing with these graphics. So this is what Sketchpad was in 1963. You can look up details about that. So here's a continuing history lesson for you. Look at the state of the art in 1978. This is computer graphics, everybody. The bumpy donut. Anyone who's gone to a SIGGRAPH conference? I don't know. Oh, SIGGRAPH Asia is coming up, too. I know we have some people are going there. Anyone know of SIGGRAPH or going to SIGGRAPH Asia? Show some hands. Anybody at all? Oh, we got to get you all to go to SIGGRAPH, especially the World Conference on Computer Graphics and Interactive Techniques. So look how far we've come from 1978. Normalized bump mapping, ray tracing, Turner-Whitted. All of these people who invented this technology, by the way, are a little older than me, but are very active still in the field, which is fantastic. It's really amazing that all these people are still actively creating. So now let's bring these two together. So I had a little bit of a film history, early computer graphics. So bringing them together, this, a good friend of mine, Douglas Trumbull, Andromeda Strain, anyone see this original movie? Really fantastic. Is actually not computer graphics. This was the last film that had this kind of look to it that was done traditional animation style, like Disney, right? Codalits and overlaying, but it was not computer graphics. This was. So when we started using computer graphics in film, very expensive. And this first example is basically what you would do with a simple Photoshop filter now, right? You basically input footage and block pixelize it and then film it right back out, Westworld. And then now we might start getting to some films that more of you have seen. Everyone's seen Star Wars, right? Right, yes. So my friend Larry Cuba did the Death Star simulation. That's him there. That's Larry. That's his computer. Look at that setup, all those dials and knobs. And the funny story behind this is when he was originally contracted to do those Death Star graphics, and he did them all by himself, he had about 4 months to do the work, which he thought was a fairly tight schedule. Well, soon enough, as soon as he signed the contract, he got word that actually it wasn't 4 months, it was only 2 months. And worse than that, they needed it in half that time to get the footage he was working on to the film studio so they could rear project it for the actors. So really, he only had a couple of weeks. And he finally pulled it off, but it's a great example of what you can do under great adversity. And here's a shot of the state-of-the-art in 1975. Of course, Star Wars came out 2 years later in 77, but this is how we did the work earlier. More examples of what they call vector graphics. So even today, there's basically two types of computer graphics to break down. One is raster-based, right, that are made up of pixels. The other is vector-based, where it's line art, and it's basically infinite resolution. So this vector-based graphics was popular at the time. This was from Alien. And then this piece is very, very key to the development of filmmaking and computer graphics. This was the first sequence ever used in a feature film that was entirely 100% computer generated from scratch. So one of my favorite Star Trek movies. And just to give you an idea of the type of filmmaker George Lucas was, I'll tell you a story. Oh, see? I'll tell you a story. The story is, so the folks who brought this team together from University of Utah and Y4iT, university researchers, are in the research development department of Lucasfilm. And they spend years developing this technology and months producing this clip. Radically new fractal-based graphics by Lauren Carpenter. Just an amazing breakthrough in technology and application. And when they finally got this thing done, they showed it to George Lucas for the first time, and he walks in, and famously, he said 2 words, or 3, depending on how you say it. He said, "Nice camera move." And if you know the movie, it is a nice camera move. You basically swoop into this moon. It's the Genesis effect rocket, right? But the point was, he didn't see, as a filmmaker, he didn't appreciate any of the technology at all. He just wanted to see how it benefited the story on camera. Tron, of course, the original. So the technologies here of the day involved basically every company in the world who could do this stuff, and it was radically different how it was produced. The vast majority of the effects, again, believe it or not, were traditionally done. All of the characters were filmed with these suits with very high contrasting black and white patterns, and it was all shipped over to Asia, even back then, to hand color. Again, just like Disney style, frame by frame. Last Starfighter, I'll go through this a little bit quick. So to give an appreciation for the university setting where we are right now, all of this technology, all of these wonderful magic tools and applications all originally come from university researchers like some of you. So today, Disney Pixar, of course, arguably the best digital storytellers in the world. Disney Pixar came from, before Disney merged with Pixar, Pixar came from Lucasfilm, the same people who Lucas hired to do that Genesis effect. Lucasfilm folks came from Y4iT, who came from the University of Utah. So it all gets back to university research. This is a brief story I want to tell you just about how significant this is. Has anyone seen this movie? It's a little bit more obscure, but it's a wonderful little film. And this pioneered a technique that was very, very big about 15 years ago called morphing. Morphing. So transmorphing something into something else. So this whole sequence was about changing one animal into the next. And these are some folks, Doug Smith and Dennis Murin. So the technique here is to input your character, right? Again, frame by frame. This is all very tedious. With a dot matrix. I don't know if you can see this on there. It's kind of faint. But basically, there's a grid of dots. And you just match up 2 different elements, the ostrich and the turtle. And the same corresponding dot on each of the passes matches up each of the characters. And, not that one. So when it's played back, whatever dot's on the nose of the turtle will move to where the nose is on the ostrich. And it's relatively simple, but back then when it was done from scratch, it was really amazing. And then the next generation of that was, this was another milestone, The Last Crusade. The first time elements were digitally scanned in, computer manipulated, and then laser scanned out to film. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This was a pretty ugly end to this guy. So, Photoshop. Here's something I know everybody knows and uses. This is its origins, again, at Industrial Light and Magic. So John and Thomas Noel, you can read a lot more about this in my book. But basically, these are just some fun trivia for you. Some of the original names for Photoshop, it wasn't always that name. Display Image Pro, 1989. The first shot that it was used on, Die Hard 2. I'm going to get through this a little bit. All right, so this is getting into the modern age a little bit. This was the first feature film that I worked on personally, Hook. And the amazing thing about Hook was at a time when all of the very traditional effects were just going to begin to end, and all the computer graphic effects were just beginning to take over. So Hook was a fantastic combination of all of these. So this was a good example of one shot that I did as a technical director. A TD is a term we use, by the way. It's a little bit of a misnomer. It's very technical. You're not really directing much, but TD is the term nonetheless. So this was a traditional matte painting, right? That was about, maybe 12 feet wide by 4 feet tall, painted on glass of the island. And then what it was used for is that we digitally scanned that matte painting, put it into a computer, and laid it onto 3D geometry of Alias, the software that has recently become Maya. And what that did was allow it to be projected onto a 3D computer graphic surface to appear to be three-dimensional itself, but it's really a 2D painting. And then lots of other elements. The clouds are actually what they call fiber fill. They're basically really large, white, puffy things on a stage about this size. A huge, huge, long stage shot with motion control. And then you've got Robin Williams there flying with his arms out. You can't quite see that. And all of this is digitally composited together with added pixie dust and painted clouds. All right, here's another great technology story for you. So when we finished Hook, we started doing pre-production research on Jurassic Park, which I know everybody has seen. I don't have to ask. So what you see here is, you remember King Kong, right? Done traditional stop-motion animation. Well, this is the exoskeleton. This is the armature of every stop-motion character. It's just a bit of metal and joints. Now, traditionally, like in King Kong, you would cover that armature with rubber and fur and make it look really good for the camera, because you would actually photograph that. And then the stop-motion animator, you can see at the top, positions this frame by frame very, very delicately. I'm sure most of you know what stop-motion animation is. Now, the difference was when Steven Spielberg originally decided to produce Jurassic Park, all of the dinosaurs were going to be done traditional stop-motion animation techniques. But my colleagues at Industrial Light and Magic did some computer graphic tests that blew him away. They impressed him so much, he decided to forever throw out and move on from traditional stop motion and decided to do it in computer graphics. Well, how do you do that? There were no computer animators, right? No one knew how to do this stuff. So they had to hire the traditional stop motion animators and somehow allow them to translate their craft into computer graphics, and this is how they did it. So what they did was they took the armature and just hooked up computerized actuators to it. So all of their animation, all the motion that they did on this armature was translated frame by frame into the computer, and then digitally we added digital muscles and digital skin and digital rendering and lighting. So that way we could use the incredible talent of all these traditional stop motion animators. This is when computer graphics started to branch out into other areas. So many of you probably have not been to Las Vegas, I'm guessing. But if you did, the giant Pyramid Hotel, Luxor, has an entertainment floor, what we call a special venue or ride films, you know, where you sit in a cart and ride in front of very, very high-resolution graphics. Okay, so the next age of computer graphics here I want to tell you about is going back to, remember I talked to you about the two types of graphics. One was vector, which was line-based, and the other was raster-based. So this, of course, is a technique, and I'll go back and forth here. Look, here's the original footage, right? And there's the new footage. So the idea is to very seamlessly paint out, and this is relatively simple these days with Photoshop. Everybody does this to touch up their family photos and things. But back then, to do it to this level at film quality was just really amazing. So when there were hundreds and hundreds of films done that way during the time. But my favorite kind of work actually wasn't that. It was this, Batman Forever, second or third Batman film, I can't remember. They're making so many of them. But this is what Gotham City looks like without texture maps and surfaces. So this is, I built this with my team, and that's, again, just the raw computer graphic geometry that you see when you first build it and before you put the textures on it. This, on the other hand, is what it looks like, not Gotham City, but Cloud City, after you put on the textures and add the lighting and all the compositing of lights. So this was a completely digital scene, of course, that I got to fly on the Millennium Falcon. That was pretty cool. And another secret, if you can keep it, don't tell anybody, I needed to have some pixel definition, some details within the cockpit of the Falcon, and I just needed a picture really quick. I happened to have one on my desktop at work, and it was a picture of my daughter. So I used that, and to this day, it's actually my daughter that's flying the Millennium Falcon in this sequence. She likes that story. We know about Titanic. Oh, interesting story for all the science geeks out there. I don't know if you heard, when Jim Cameron was going to re-release Titanic just last year in 3D, he got a call from a scientist by the name of Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't know if any of you know him, theoretical physicist. He pointed out to Jim Cameron that the stars that we put in these scenes of the Titanic sinking were not accurate. He knew somehow that the star patterns, the constellation patterns at that precise day in the North Atlantic would have been different. So Jim Cameron, the ultimate detail obsessor that has ever lived, changed the stars. So now, when you see the special edition, the stars in the sky are correct. Just a level of detail we don't need to know. Episode 1, Avatar. Of course, now the level of complexity is just mind-blowing, right? You can literally show on screen any world that you can imagine in your head, and there's absolutely no limits to what you can achieve. I didn't personally work on Avatar. By this time, I was back on the East Coast doing other things, but many friends of mine did, and we all know this now. So that's kind of an arc of computer graphics and film, and a particular love of mine is storytelling and acting, right? So I want to highlight next the history of CG characters in films. And back, if you remember Westworld, right? First ever use of computer graphics in film, that block pics. Well, its sequel, Future World, was the first example of a character representation in film, and this was done with polygons. Very crude. If anyone has the collection of Pixar shorts, you'll know what this one is. This was the very first character test that John Lasseter did at LucasArts, Lucasfilm rather, Andre and Wally B. And this is another one which is a really good example of a digital character, The Stained Glass Knight, another good movie. Not many people have seen this, young Sherlock Holmes. And the process of this, how's this for high tech, huh? This is before everyone started to hear about motion capture, where you put the ping pong balls on people and you record their motion. Well, this is the way we used to do it. So here's the final shot. You just dress up a guy, put him against the grid, and then hand rotoscope them frame by frame. You have the art done by an art department laying on the table, digitized in by a pen, very tedious. And here's the custom paint system at ILM called Layer Paint we would use. You can see in the upper right, we would load in 3 frames at a time and basically flip through them like a traditional animator. And then this is how you got the graphics onto film. We couldn't digitally record them back then, just shot them with a 35 millimeter camera, literally looking at the screen. And again, remember we talked about multiple passes of everything? So you've got shiny pass, the diffuse pass, highlights, and then again the final shot. Extremely complex. And that was 1985. So characters in Toy Story, Knick Knack. Another funny story. Has anyone seen this? This is my favorite Pixar short. Anyone know Knick Knack? Yeah, a few, I think. So really funny. Everybody knows, right? Pixar does short animated films to show before their main movies, and they used to be very, very much anticipated. Well, when this first came out in 1989, my favorite, huge hit, but when Toy Story was being re-released, Steve Jobs and John Lasseter, all by then, 15, 20 years later, had little children, and they thought this wasn't the best representation for their daughters, right? I don't know why. So, anybody notice the difference? So my friend, Bill Polson, he was actually required to do that cosmetic surgery on our character for the re-release. And to prove it, here's the code. So any of you software people, you can see, it just translated the offending geometry off screen. But he was pretty embarrassed about having to do that. So cyber scanning heads, this was the new technology. A technology actually, by the way I used for the Bruce Lee title for the Xbox launch up at Microsoft Research. But scanning your heads, putting it in. Here's what the raw sectional data looks like. And then you need a texture map to wrap around that, right? So how's that for a likeness? So you wrap that picture around your wire vector. And if any of you complain that my computer is not fast enough, or I need a better computer, this is what we dealt with back then. So this is state-of-the-art 96, and that's not a typo, by the way, 8 megabytes of RAM, megabytes. All on a 200-pound workstation. Your watches probably have more power than this today. All right. Hopefully everybody's seen The Abyss. This is the first movie that really influenced me a lot. You can see the extruded, very, very simple geometry. And for those of you in computer graphics, this was really the age of the power of the shader. The shader is the algorithm that basically surfaces things and describes the technique of the qualities of light reflectance and texture and color. And so you can see the complexity of the Abyss pseudopod is extremely simple. But when it's actually surfaced with shaders and reflectance and displacement, it can be extremely realistic. So here's another one, an example of extremely low-tech ways of getting a character animation into a film. If anybody remembers this, this is in the back parking lot of Industrial Light and Magic, and we literally took Robert Patrick and drew on his body with black magic markers. So this is just before I got to ILM. All my friends had the great pleasure of doing this. And if you remember the scene, this is basically him just running at camera. So the animators just had to, what they call rotoscope, just frame by frame, match up the position of the live action reference with the CG character. And the same for the shot. Here we go. My favorite scene, when the T-Rex eats a lawyer. So this is early pre-production. Again, this is what it looks like without those shaders I was telling you about. Very rough geometry, very rough blocking, and here's the final shot. It took, as you can see, at least 2 years just to basically get the pre-production up until the film was released. And this is our humble offices, right? Not at all glamorous, but you can tell what movie we were working on, though. Flintstones. Why would I show the Flintstones? Not a great film. Just to give you a date, 1994. This is the very first time that they developed digital fur for feature film applications. So the saber-toothed tiger there is just a little bit of trivia, and it's come a long way since then. Toy Story, Homer, and South Park. So the story behind this was Matt and Trey. They had produced a pilot using traditional stop-motion animation. So everyone knows it's a downward shooting camera with lights from the side, and again, using traditional just construction paper cutouts, right? And it's moved very infinitesimally, just a little bit at a time, and it takes forever. It might take 6 months to produce a 20-minute test. So Comedy Central wanted to produce this as a series, but of course there's no way you can do that doing it traditionally, so they approached me to develop a technique, any technique, that they could produce this much, much quicker. So I chose computer graphics, and the rest is history, I guess. So everything that you see, the important thing was that it didn't look like computer graphics. And that's something that's powerful about the medium, is that it can represent invisible effects like this. So again, I am Terrence. I do not know who Philip is. Return of the Jedi Special Edition. So we added in tentacles. And just to give you an idea of how much more tedious it used to be was, if you can see what she's doing there, remember I talked about multiple passes, right? So in the shot up here, we've got the desert, which is a live-action plate. We've got a large-scale miniature in the background, and we've got a separate element in the foreground. Now, back in the optically compositing days, this is what they had to do. They had to cut film with a razor blade very, very precisely for every single frame. So when they overlaid these elements on top of each other, they would match up exactly. Phantom Menace. Yeah, I'll try to skip over this one. I introduced Jar Jar to the world. I'm sorry. I apologize. He's such an annoying character. But this is the, we're talking about characters here, of course, right? So this was an attempt at making a completely photorealistic talking character that interacts with other characters. And this was significant performance capture. So just an amazing accomplishment in realism and emotion and storytelling. And the way they started doing this is Andy Serkis, the actor here, of course, is filmed with reference. So it's the actor that's actually getting across the emotion and communicating to the audience, which is very important. Dobby was another. Star Wars, the Hulk. Of course, they've redone that 3 times. And the same thing with King Kong. So it's the same actor, Andy Serkis, that did Gollum. And you can see all the little dots on his face, motion capture, and done as a separate pass from the technology that is doing the motion capture for the whole body. So you have 2 different people doing the face and the body motions. And this is getting to be the culmination of digital characters. So when I saw this film, I don't know if you're like me, but I don't like spoilers. Spoilers meaning when I hear about a film coming out that I want to see, I don't want to know a lot about it ahead of time. So I didn't read the magazines. I didn't talk to my friends who were working on the film. I saw the movie, and I knew there was some kind of makeup they had done to Brad Pitt to make him look old, but I had no idea. So what I didn't know was the first 20 minutes of the film, Brad Pitt's character is completely digital from the shoulders up, 100% computer graphics. They filmed an elderly man, scanned in Brad's face for reference, and then duplicated it in computer graphics. It blew me away. It was just absolutely mind-boggling that they can do this now. Just completely replace a character 100% digitally, and nobody knew. I didn't. So, the future. And I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I'll wrap up so we can have some questions. So it's really a global marketplace that's doing all of this amazing technology and applications to creativity and collaboration. And you notice I chose this view on purpose that it is not US-centric. It's really, really worldwide. So the future of visual effects, we talked about this a little earlier actually with some folks that there's lots of work out there. It's incredibly creative. The business side, unfortunately, is extremely difficult. It's very, very difficult to make a viable business model for this. And we can talk about that if we have questions of business majors in college. But it all comes down to money. It's all about, my golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rules, unfortunately. So it's a very tough competition. But my upside, my very enthusiastic prediction is about collaboration. So the great thing is about everyone here can look forward to working with lots of different colleagues in lots of different areas on the technology, IT side, with artists, programmers, engineers, and sometimes the most obvious things only happen when you collaborate. So I'm going to give you a quick example here. Very early in filmmaking, a director was the one who literally owned a camera, right? If you had the camera, if you could afford the camera, you would direct the film. But very quickly, directors realized, I don't want to do this. I should hire a cameraman to do this. So I'm going to use this for an example. You remember back at the beginning of my talk, the original King Kong. This is a great example of collaboration. So this is the entire visual effects or special effects credit list for the original King Kong. That's it, 16 people. They did everything, right? So you can imagine the general collaboration that was necessary. So fast forward to 2005, right? The new King Kong. Here's the credit list of the visual effects on King Kong. That's only A through E, folks. There's E through M, M through W. You get the idea. This is the visual effects credit list. 537 people compared to 16. So it's just insane the amount of collaboration and the scope of these films today that you all will get an opportunity to work on. So I'm going to start to wrap up talking about creative industries and how this collaboration is all about the wider, the broader creative industries field that I'm so passionate about. So the two big areas that I lump creative industries into, not just film, but are game design and interactive media. And all these different industries, universities, everything revolves around and collaborates through either game design or interactive media in some way. And what we do at our university through creative industries is we apply, see, like the traditional university departments over there that many of you are probably in now, and how they apply, and everybody works together. So that's creative industries. So again, examples of SIGGRAPH, I mentioned at the very beginning, I highly encourage you to look up SIGGRAPH Asia, which is coming up in December. But this is one thing that I did at SIGGRAPH, talking about a creative industry, designed the world's largest digital Etch-A-Sketch. So here's an example of if you're a creative technology IT person, and you can collaborate on something that's a lot of fun. And I took an audience about this size, actually, 2,000 to 3,000 people, split them in half, and had shiny sticks, basically, to let them control both. Ooh, look, we're bobbling around. Control both of the knobs. And an audience of 3,000 controlled 2 knobs and was able to draw pictures. It was really amazing. A lot of people collaborated. So you remember this? So I'm going to wrap up. Almost everybody stayed, I think. So what's in the box? What's my bold prediction? Because I like to be forward-thinking and very positive. So any student of history will know these are the generally accepted ages of mankind, right? So we've gone through all the Machine Age, Atomic Age. Now, technically, today we're still in the computer age. The computer information age is still the currently accepted age of mankind that we're in. Well, I argue that. I believe, this is my big, grand, bold prediction, I believe, what's in my box, that we've actually already entered the age of collaboration. I think the advent of social media, of online instant collaboration worldwide has gone beyond simple information and computer, but that will allow collaboration, true collaboration across all the technologies of creative industries together. So I tried to summarize an exciting field for everybody, and I've got 2 more days to talk about it, so I hope you'll come back. But thank you very much, and we have time for questions.